Hi everyone, I am Coach Mandy and you guys are watching Altered Self Wellness. This is the place to be if you want to transform into the best possible version of yourself. Today I am going to spend some time talking about trauma. You know that this is a very uncomfortable subject for me and it may be for you. So if you do not want to hear about trauma, do not continue watching. Trauma, there's a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of like it's portrayed a certain way in movies, and I think that people have a belief or fear about it, and I want to come forward and talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about what I've learned in the last few years with how trauma actually manifests in the body, how it's related to chronic pain and chronic illness. And I'm going to do my best to explain this in a way that is informative and effective. I am a wellness coach, so working on trauma with my clients is out of my scope, but I am also a person who has PTSD, and I think I am obligated to share this with you because if you have PTSD, I want you to know that you're not alone and that there are options, and I will go over some of those for you know building a beautiful and successful life in spite of it. A large amount of us are going to have a traumatic experience in our life, and not everyone is going to develop PTSD from that. There are people who end up in a car accident and end up with PTSD from that one-time event. And then there are people who have repeated exposure to trauma that end up with kind of a layered in post-traumatic stress. So I have PTSD and I am very high functioning. I live very well, although from everything I've learned in the last couple years, my body may not be saying the same thing. Let's see. Growing up, things were out of my control, but there was a lot of dangerous situations and abuse and neglect, and I went into foster care a couple times and came back with some very unsettling behaviors. Then as a young adult, I perpetuated that cycle where I had witnessed so much violence and terrifying moments. At the age of 23, I was pretty much dying. I was self-destructing. I had terrible self-destructive behaviors like drug addiction, like eating disorders, and it was at that age that I decided I was going to have to learn how to do things differently, and I let go of every single belief that I had ever created at that point in my life and became willing to learn a new way of life. Amongst my friends, we call this a surrender. And I let go and learned new tools and new beliefs about how people worked, about, just everything that I knew to be true. I let that go and learned new stuff. And that has helped me build a successful and healthy and beautiful life. Over 12 years of practicing a new way of life, I mitigate my symptoms of PTSD very well. Like I have a beautiful family, the cycle is being broken in my home. And that's why I'm speaking out about this. I've done a lot of work on this because I do not want this to carry over into my family or to my daughter. So a lot of people associate PTSD with just our war veterans. And this is inaccurate information. There are a lot of wars being fought within the privacy of our own homes on our own land that can cause PTSD. 1 in 5 Americans have been molested. 1 in 4 Americans grew up with alcoholic parents, and 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence. Such experience inevitably can leave traces on the body, the mind, and even our biology. The best way that I've heard PTSD and the switching of our chemical I am not doing well here, guys. Oh, okay. PTSD can occur if there is an immense fear for your life. David Snyder is a world-renowned hypnotherapist and demonstrates rapid transformation skills, gave the best explanation for trauma that I've ever heard, and I will share that with you. He says that when you're in a terrifying or traumatic situation and the brain needs to switch into fight or flight, all of those feelings, that feelings of fear and terror, are vibrations in our body. That's what feelings are. And basically our body caps those off and then hides them in the body while it switches into fight or flight. So with repeated exposure to trauma, it just stays stuck in the body, and over, a prolonged period of time, that stress can cause an okay, I give up. All right, I'm gonna keep trying. Well, the problem with PTSD and how it relates to chronic pain or chronic illness is that all that energy stays capped off in the body for a prolonged amount of time, causing physiological responses like autoimmunes and chronic pain, or exacerbating the symptoms. I read an amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Kolk, who is one of the world foremost leading experts on traumatic stress, with over 3 decades of experience, and he communicates it so well. He provides examples in his book of people that are living with PTSD on a daily basis, and what PTSD looks like from the outside and what it feels like on the inside. And then he leads into kind of different treatment options for PTSD, more options than just mitigating symptoms or medicating symptoms. And so he expresses a general interest and a desire to truly go in and treat the root cause of PTSD. And he mentions several ways to do this that have been effective in people's lives. And I find so much inspiration from that, so much hope. One of the things that I did read in his book is that there are a couple different responses for people that have PTSD. There is people who become hypervigilant for perceived threats, always kind of on guard and aware, which is how I am. And then there are people that have no sense of danger. They trip a lot, they get in car accidents, they do not perceive dangers around them. And so I just found that a fascinating information. So we've talked about David Snyder, we've talked about Dr. Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score. And then I also talked to a local doctor, Dr. Christy Sellers, who was telling me that there is a terminology for basically when an injury occurs, if it is during a traumatic experience, that years later a person can have surgery, or a doctor may go in and perform surgery on a certain injury and release the trauma back into the body. And I found that also intriguing and fascinating because after my first surgery, I seemed to have not handled it well. And I had a physical therapist that was working one-on-one with me and could tell right away that I have PTSD, which most people can't tell. So he was the one that introduced me to some of the treatments that are offered for PTSD that are mentioned in Dr. Kolk's book, 2 of which are EMDR and EFT, an emotional freedom technique. And he practiced these with me a little bit. And for the first time in my life, I was able to draw up a memory that causes discomfort, and he was able to help me desensitize that. And he encouraged me to explore these options in the future, and which led me to the book The Body Keeps the Score. For me, the way that trauma looks on the outside is not that visible, I guess. I may look a little neurotic, like busy, doing busy work because I'm trying to distract myself. So cleaning my home, or compulsively eating comfort foods, or impulse shopping is probably how it looks on the outside, and I don't want to minimize this. I don't want to minimize this, but I think that it's important to know that the way it looks on the outside versus the way that what's going on the inside is a big difference. So on the inside, I can recognize that I'm firing on one cylinder in my brain instead of 6. So my short-term memory gets affected, and so it's very similar to when you walk in a room and you forget why you walked in there. But when I get triggered, these symptoms will last for quite a few days, and so my short-term memory isn't fully operational. I have a hard time sleeping. I think my mind distracts itself by obsessing on something, and I have intrusive memories from my past that I can't have a hard time letting go of. I just become kind of hyper vigilant to movement, sounds, smells, and light. So like a cupboard door shutting is enough to kind of register as pain within my body, and hard time sleeping at night and connecting to people. It's during these times that I usually implement more self-care. I will isolate myself and wait it out, wait for the symptoms to pass. And I haven't gone into this as much as I hope to in the future for myself as far as healing goes, because anytime I get near the subject, like with a 10-foot pole, I end up triggered, and it's a few days before I can get myself fully back together. And as a mother, as a wife, as a coach, there are people that are depending on me, and I like to be fully present, and when I'm triggered, I don't feel like I'm fully present and connecting to people very well. And so treating it can be so uncomfortable because I have to be willing to get kind of off for a period of time, and so far I have not been willing to do that. So EFT, emotional freedom technique, is a series of tapping that acts as a reset on our body. So I can pull up a memory, do this series of tapping on my body on pressure points, and reprogram my brain and body not to have a response, not to have, I can get rid of the trigger and not have a response to that memory if I do that. And I explored it a little bit, but not in depth, like I said, because it messes me up. And so EMDR is where they use a light bar, but I have even had this practiced on me with just a finger, just following a finger, because from my understanding, your eyes doing this kind of movement it's not possible for you to do this and be in fight or flight. So I use this a lot to pull myself out of a triggered state for PTSD. But I believe that if you wanted to get treatment and it was EMDR that you were interested in, that you could go in and they would have a light bar with this, and they would have you follow the lights and bring up old memories, and once again re-signal your brain to have a different response to those memories. At one point, after reading these books and kind of having these symptoms exacerbated from whatever happened with these surgeries, I went away to the White Raven Center, and it's in Anchorage, Alaska. Every month they do a intensive weekend trauma therapy, and they offer this every month. And this was kind of a profound experience. This is probably the only place where I've ever been where I knew that the doctors there understood what was going on with me and trauma better than I did. So I felt very safe. It was intense, and they did have us process a few different times throughout the weekend, and that involved laying blindfolded on a mat with people around me and connecting through breath, like deep belly breathing for about 10 minutes. And then my nose would start running, coughing up stuff, and then they would start to walk me back through memories, and I had the opportunity to, punch things and scream and yell and say all those things that I wanted to say when I was a little girl. So that's what I mean. It was intense. If you have trauma, you're probably going, oh no. But it did actually move the energy, which I think is what is important to me today. Like, I need to get to the root cause, because here's the truth. Yes, you can have PTSD and live with it and live a very high functioning life, and just mitigate the symptoms with either, like I do, I wait it out, or medication. But there are other options that address the root cause of PTSD. There is actual healing that can be done if you're willing to get uncomfortable for, a certain amount of time. In my case, it's I have repeated exposures to trauma, and so it's going to take a lot of work and a long time and a lot of money. And that may be part of what has held me back, because like I said, on the outside it doesn't seem like it's much. I just appear a little anxious or a little nervous or very busy. On the inside is what I'm afraid of, inside my body, and I honestly don't like not being able to talk about this or carrying shame over that isn't mine to carry. What occurred in my life when I was a child is not my shame, but I still have that biological response to it. I still have the physiological response to it. I still go to a place of deep shame, and it's not mine to carry. So I am really out of my comfort zone by sitting here and talking with you guys about trauma. It has been a awful week of being triggered, just trying to talk about it. And I'm going to get to keep going on this and keep learning about this and keep talking about this, because if you're struggling with PTSD, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that there are solutions available, and if I have to be the guinea pig, then I will. I just absolutely will. There are professional and experienced medical providers that can make you feel safe and walk you through this. And it's okay. It's okay. We all have skeletons in our closet. Some of us have more than others, and it's okay to talk about this and break the stigma of post-traumatic stress disorder, of addiction, of eating disorders. It's okay to reach out and get help. There is a lot of help available. And I think until some of us truly have the courage to come out and speak honestly about this stuff and get a little uncomfortable, this is going to keep perpetuating the cycle within our families, and that's not okay. There is a big link between post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic pain, chronic illness. And, if you have PTSD, please reach out to somebody, get some help, talk to somebody. If this video was helpful in any way at all, let me know. If there is something that you would like to hear that I didn't mention, that I didn't talk about, let me know. You can private message me. You can leave a comment. Let's break this silence. Let's work together. Let's make a difference in this world. With that, let's build wellness instead of treating disease, you guys. Let's make a difference in the world. Let's live beautiful, happy, joyous lives where we go out and love each other just as we are. Thank you for allowing me to share with you guys a little bit about my journey and what I have learned about PTSD. This is something you're struggling with, be sure to check out the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And with that, you guys have my full support and encouragement to speak out and reach out. Bye, guys.
About to leave, already packing.